Okay, it looks like we're ready to go. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar series on managing drought in the Southern Plains. My name is Chad McNutt, and I'm with the National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS, and we're located at NOAA here in Boulder, Colorado. I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. Rachel Riley, the SCIP Associate Program Manager, is managing the webinar, so if there are any problems, we'll all blame Rachel. Margaret Boone, who usually manages the webinar, is not able to join us because she just gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. So congratulations to Margaret and her family. So let's get down to business. The topic of today's webinar is wildfire. We will hear from 4 presenters on topics of forecasting and managing fire. As usual, though, we'll first begin with the drought update and outlook from Brian Fuchs, the climatologist from the Drought Monitor author, who's a climatologist and also a Drought Monitor author, and he's from the National Drought Mitigation Center in Lincoln, Nebraska. Brian will be followed by Phillip Bothwell, who's a senior development meteorologist from the National Weather Service Storm Prediction Center, who will then be followed by Brad Smith, who's a wildfire analyst from the Texas Forestry Service, and he'll talk about the fires that Texas has experienced in 2011 and then the ongoing fire concerns there in the state. Next up will be John Weir, who's a research associate in natural resource ecology and management at Oklahoma State University. He's also the chairman of the Oklahoma Prescribed Fire Council. And he will give us a presentation on using fire as a rangeland management tool. The last up for the focus topic of this webinar is Karen Stafford. She's a wildland urban interface specialist with the Texas Forest Service. And she'll give have a discussion about the Ready, Set, Go program for reducing risk of wildfires. And the last thing that we'll do is the presentations will be followed by the state climatologists that we have on the line. I know we have at least 2 or 3 who'll be joining us today. We may have others. And they'll give us a brief update on conditions in their states. Before we go on too far, I'd like to recognize the support of those who made the webinar series possible. This would be David Brown, who's the NOAA Regional Climate Services Director for the Southern Region, Mike Hayes, the Director of the National Drought Mitigation Center, and Mark Schaefer with the Southern Climate Impacts Planning Program, or SCIP. We'd also greatly appreciate those of you who join us in the webinar series and recognize that you all have your time is valuable and that we really appreciate you participating in this. So the next slide, Rachel, if you would pull it up. These webinars were really established as a bi-weekly series occurring on the 2nd and 4th Thursdays of each month. And due to the growing interest in developing a companion series for a range of other hazards, so not just focused on drought, and these hazards that are affecting our region, such as severe storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, and winter storms, we're considering moving these to monthly series instead of a bi-weekly one. But don't worry, we're definitely committed to maintaining this series as long as the drought continues and you find the information relevant and useful. The biggest thing here is that we'll keep probably the 2nd Thursday briefing, which would just be a briefing on the drought, but then just have a once a month sort of topic focused briefing. That would be on the second Thursday of the month. So we would still kind of have a bi-weekly briefing. They just wouldn't have a topic for each one. So the 4th Thursday briefing would be a briefing only, which would have similar to what Brian will cover today, while the 2nd Thursday of the month would have a topic with it. So if you have any concerns about this approach, please email or call SCIP and let us know if you have questions or concerns. The next full webinar that will include a focus topic will be held on Thursday, March 8th. So quickly, the objective of the webinars are really to improve communication across our region to help those agencies and organizations that are managing out. Your interests and needs are important to us, and we encourage you to help us select presentation topics either through the online poll that you see on the screen right now, or through the chat box, or by emailing or calling SCIP. We welcome suggestions on presenters as well. Please go ahead and pick the topics that are of interest to you now. So I'll go on and just say that that you may ask questions or make comments at any time throughout the presentations today. You can do that through typing in your chat box. It's in the, at least on my computer, it's on the lower right-hand part of your screen. We will address all the questions, though, at the end of the presentation. Each webinar is recorded and posted on the SCIP YouTube channel. The PowerPoint slides are posted on the NIDIS Drought portal. It's www.drought.gov. It's in the southern plains of the Drought portal. And we also will post a 2-page PDF summary following the webinar. It'll probably be available next week on the NIDIS Drought portal at drought.gov. It'll also be on the SCIP website and the SCIP Facebook page. We also put up a list of resources, including all of these links at the end of all the presentations. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Brian Fuchs from the National Drought Mitigation Center. Brian, would you like to go ahead and start?
Yeah, I'll take it over, Chad. Thank you for the introduction. As Chad said, my name is Brian Fuchs. I'm a climatologist here at the National Drought Mitigation Center, School of Natural Resources at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. Also one of the U.S. Drought Monitor authors, and going to give a quick update of what we're seeing in the region, as well as a little hint of what's coming up in the next couple of weeks with an outlook, and also introduce a couple products at the very end. So first slide. Here is the U.S. Drought Monitor image that came out this morning, and what you can see is there has been some changes going on with the Drought Monitor, especially in the SCIP region of the Southern Plains, and you can see that there is some definite drought-free regions in portions of eastern Oklahoma and northern Texas that we're looking at. I will highlight on the map that we see a lot of L's in the region, and those are signifying the long-term drought impacts continuing in those regions. What that is telling us is, even with the recent rains that have been very much non-La Nina-ish in their occurrences, but the concerns are that some of the long-term impacts, mainly related to hydrology, water supply, water table, reservoir levels, and whatnot, are still recovering during this process. So those areas that, even though the appearance outside may look like there's been quite a bit of improvement and things are fairly good, we still need to consider where those L's are taking shape and the long-term impacts. Portions of Texas, especially down in the southern tip and in West Texas, have not seen the same amount of precipitation, but then again, wintertime is a fairly dry time of year for them. So what is interesting to look at is just the areas that have seen the improvement, to watch them and see if this wet pattern does continue that we have experienced over the last few weeks. Next slide, zooming in on the region, we can get a better look of what I've been describing on these improvements. And looking at the data table to the left of the image, we can see that 1 year ago, about 57% of the region was in drought, which is D1 to D4, and currently it's still at almost 71%. So what this is showing is, even with the improvements that we're seeing, we're still seeing quite a bit of drought compared to where we even were last year, when this drought was really starting to intensify and spread throughout the region. Where we were from last week, though, we do see some improvement, down from 72%, and definitely looking at that D4 from especially 3 months ago, where we had 41% of this region in D4 drought. That's down to about 11.5%. So through this La Nina winter, we have experienced some improvement through the region, which is good to point out and very favorable for those that have been impacted. So continue watching these weekly updates to see where the rains and the precipitation that the area is receiving is making the most impact for improvements to the drought status. Next slide. Here we're looking at the 5-day outlooks for the United States, and the QPF outlook actually was updated this morning, and we weren't able to get that into the presentation. But looking over the region, there is still a wet signal. And comparing what's on the image to the one that came out this morning, what we're seeing is that larger area of precipitation that was barely touching South Texas is now entering most of East Texas and much of Louisiana as the areas that are progged to receive the most precipitation over the next 5 days, with amounts generally in the inch to an inch-and-a-half range. And through much of the entire southern plains, we're going to see a fairly good chance of picking up some precipitation. So again, this non-La Nina-ish signal that we've seen over the last several months is continuing with another strong storm event that's going down and impacting the region. And looking at the current radar for this morning, you can see that some of that precipitation is already taking place in the far southern reaches of Texas, as well as over the Oklahoma and Texas panhandles, as some lighter precipitation is moving through. Temperatures, we are going to experience some cold weather all the way down through the entire central part of the country, from the Canadian border down through South Texas, where temperatures are going to be anywhere from 6 to 12 degrees below normal during the next 5-day period. So that winter that much of the region has not felt is definitely pulling its grips in this week here, with a dip of the jet stream bringing in some of that cold Canadian air. Next slide. The 8 to 14-day outlook, the upper left-hand slide is looking at temperatures, and we continue to see a bit of a cold signal developing through not only the Rocky Mountains in western U.S., but also into portions of the central and southern plains, as the odds are for temperatures to be below normal are quite high, and some warmer temperatures continuing along the upper Midwest and into New England, where the graphic is showing those, as well as up in Alaska. Now we look at this precipitation outlook over the next 8 to 14 days. And you can really see a fairly wet signal that's showing up not only through the Ohio river valleys, but into the Mississippi river valleys. And even in the central and southern plains, we're looking at some better chances for precipitation through this time frame. And my idea is most of that weighting is coming off of this current system that's currently starting to move through the region. Next slide. And here's the monthly outlook, and also the outlook on the bottom slides through April. This was last updated on January 31st, so it's a couple weeks old. But you continue to see for February that this temperature signal for pretty much the whole eastern two-thirds of the United States is still showing this tendency for above normal temperatures, and that was on the edges of one of the warmest Januaries on record. And precipitation, we continue to see the signal for dryness over the southern U.S. and wet signal over the Ohio River Valley. And that coincides very strongly with what we typically see in a La Nina winter. And then you look at the bottom two frames and you continue to see those similar signals. What has been interesting is we have not seen this La Nina this winter behave according to what we climatologically would think would be happening. So a lot of the forecast models are still kind of lagging, in my opinion, on what we're really seeing. And so the next release of these products and the updates will be interesting to look at. But, you know, over the next couple months, the La Nina signal is still continuing, and we should see warm and dry temperatures through the southern U.S. along with that. Next slide. The seasonal drought outlook corresponds with that quite well, where we're still showing persistent and developing drought all along much of the southern U.S. and even into parts of the high plains and upper Midwest regions, where you can see a lot of development taking place over the next month or so, and some drought persisting. We do see some improvement over portions of Kansas, Oklahoma, and northern Texas, where these areas have seen the most persistent and continuous precipitation over the last several months. So we'll continue to watch those regions for potential for improvement during this time as well. Next slide. To end with, and I don't want to steal the fire of some of the other speakers here today, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of the products that are out there, that there are some forecasting tools available for the public to go to help look at the potential for fire danger that's out there. So the first slide, and this is coming from the National Interagency Coordination Center, and this is really looking at outlooks in different parts of the region and what they're looking at is highlighted there on the left-hand side under their predictive services with the weather, fuels and fire danger outlooks, national predictive services. And these products can be found at the website down below and may be of interest to those that do have interest in fire weather or concerns that it may impact them. Next slide. This is coming from the National Weather Service Fire Weather page, and as you can see across the top, this is very experimental. It's kind of new with many of the products on there linking to other existing products and trying to put together a more comprehensive site. But there is a lot of good information, and the URL is at the top, and I would say to go check it out if you do have an interest. And the next slide is coming from the Storm Prediction Center, and they actually have this fire weather outlook along with their hazards package that they put out, and you can see, you know, an example of the forecast over on the left-hand side, and then I pulled up a graphic of something that they did highlight in the past because there wasn't any critical areas right now, but you can get some information on where forecast conditions are looking the most favorable for fire weather to take place, or for wildfire occurrence to take place, excuse me. And I think that is my last, one last idea or product that's out there is this Keach Byram Drought Index, and many planners do use this as an indication of fire danger. And there has been a specific product developed in Texas using some of the radar-based precipitation tools, and you can see what the KVDI is showing as far as areas, and East Texas shows up quite well with all the recent precipitation that has definitely lowered the fire danger compared to what we're seeing still out in West Texas. And then there's a national map that's being put out by the U.S. Forest Service, and you can see some of those data points as well around the country as far as where fire danger could be a concern. And I think that is my last slide. And my contact information is up there along with my phone number. If you'd like to speak with me directly or more information on anything I presented today, feel free to contact me. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Chad for the next speaker.
Okay, Brian, thank you very much. The next speaker we have up is Phillip Bothwell. He's a Senior Development Meteorologist from the National Weather Service Storm Prediction Center. Phillip, are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
And usually I can speak loud enough for people to hear. Well, thank you very much. This is really a good chance to talk about what we do. Okay, we got some feedback here. Okay, to begin with, we actually do use virtually all of the graphics and data that Brian was talking about, because what we end up doing here at the Storm Prediction Center and Fire Weather is we get all the background information on the fuels and the long-term and short-term drought, and we basically look at the weather. So we add the weather component to this, and we now forecast fire weather outlooks out to day 8. So let's go to the next slide. We've started this over 15 years ago, and also I just want to give kudos to our forecasters that do this. We do it year-round. We have 2 shifts per day. Many of these people that forecast have master's degrees, and they're really a good group of people. And also kudos just to the fire community and firefighters, because last year in March, when you have a wildfire burning into your housing addition, and they managed to knock it down during the grass fires here, it's really, you see everything come together. So we know that the fire is a natural part of our ecosystem, and basically over 5 million acres per year are burned on average. Now, I'm a big proponent of talking about the smoke that does affect respiratory conditions for millions of people far removed from the fires. Now, the damage from these fires nationwide has continued to increase for decades, and I'm not going to go into climate change issues today. Next slide. We've actually been too good in many respects. The past fire suppression has allowed for accumulation of fuels and other invasive plant growth in forests. And as these things have grown over time, we have insects and disease that are basically not controlled by fires, but are allowed to grow. In many cases, you can have 70% of your forest in Arizona be killed by pest and disease. The other thing, and we like to build our houses where it's really pretty, right in the fire-prone areas, the forest areas, the wildland-urban interface. The other part, like in Oklahoma, where we have what's called the red cedar or eastern cedar, which is the juniper, these things are basically like growing little gasoline cans out in your yard. They're Christmas trees. They're extremely flammable. California managed to catch up by putting eucalyptus trees from Australia, which are extremely volatile. Next slide. Okay, a quick look here. Let's go to the next slide about fires virtually or anywhere in the U.S. And for myself, this was a learning experience too. Prior to us beginning in the late 90s, the fires for decades back are listed in red, and then the fires since we've been doing this are in blue, and there's not really a shift to the south, but it's just sort of recent fires that have occurred with the grass fires and swamp fires in Florida and fires in Southern California. So we can, except for about Missouri up through parts of Ohio, have fires just about anywhere. Next slide. There were primarily two large events that I think helped get us into this business. And real quick, we'll go to the next slide. The Oakland, California fire was an event that actually was forecast with a red flag warning in advance, the day in advance. But like 8 a.m. in the morning, the first spark just flew over the fire truck and got into the other fuels. And, you know, when you look at an urban area, 25 deaths in one afternoon and $1.5 million conservative damage, and over 3,000 homes destroyed, that is just right up there at the top of the scale. And this also gets things like Congress's attention and the attention of the Weather Service. And then let's go to the next slide. On the East Coast here, 1995, when things were really starting to look towards like we were going into this fire weather business, the Long Island wildfires. And to this day, I thought, well, Long Island, New York is just skyscrapers and nothing else. But it was the Pine Barren fire that burned very vigorously for one afternoon and, again, catches the attention of the Weather Service and Congress. So we were asked to spin up a fire weather program. And basically, how, when, and why did we get into this business? Next slide. I put this rather detailed slide in here, and you can always go back as this is put out for review and look from 1996 up to the current year of how we did grow this program. And just like in those late 90s, it was kind of like cells for severe storms in the 50s. We had to start from somewhere. And we've been doing this now for 15 years, and we're doing it year round, and we basically learn and grow with experience as we go along. It was agreed early on when we were doing just day 1 and day 2 forecast that they really wanted forecasts further out to day 3 or 8 or farther if possible. But nowadays, we are doing a routine forecast out to day 8, and this definitely helps for planning purposes because you can't necessarily react real quickly on day 1, but you can plan for staffing and machinery days 2, 3, 4, and out to day 8. Next slide. Okay, we're part of the whole program with the Weather Service, where we have the Climate Prediction Center, the Hydrometeorological Prediction Center, SPC, out through day 8, and the Weather Forecast Office, and then the actual incident meteorologists that are out there working on the fire line and providing local forecasts, usually through their laptop computer. So we're part of a package deal from the Weather Service here. Let's go ahead. Okay. In a nutshell, we're looking at dry, windy conditions and dry thunderstorms, which are the storms that produce lightning but no appreciable rain, basically less than 1/10 of an inch. Okay? And we've kind of seen this is just our main page, spc.noaa.gov/fire. And you click on product info at the right under it's the blue label there. You can find out more about our outlooks. We do issue the Outlook updates during the day shift now, which is a huge chance for coordination. And also the day 3 through 8 product is moved from an nighttime forecast to a daytime forecast. And that is key as we get a chance to update our product now during the day. And we have many coordination calls. Even during the slack time of the weather, we have many coordination calls where we learn about the fuels and what the field are thinking. And it's just a great, great two-way conversation where we didn't have this on the midnight shift. Next slide. There's also a link from that main page where we have fire weather images that talk about temperature, humidity, indices related to fire weather. And we have a northwest, southwest U.S. view, and then a floater image over the fire concern of the day. Next. Okay. We basically look for three types of fire weather areas. One is critical, the extremely critical. That's when conditions are really severe for wildfires, and we don't use extremely critical very often. But the thing about it, you can think of this just like for severe weather. When we have a high risk of severe weather, this is our high risk for fire weather when we use extremely critical. Not very large areas, not very often, but when we say it, we mean it. We talk about areas of dry thunderstorm potential, and then the other part, you'll often see text, and that basically means we're getting close, we want to alert you to a certain area, but maybe it's the wind is too light today, or maybe the humidity may not drop low enough, and we'll discuss that. So we're pointing you to see the text discussion in addition to the graphic. Next. We have other agencies, and at the bottom there is the link for Fire Detect. They take our outlooks and they put them on with the smoke images and the hotspots detected from all geostationary and polar satellites and other observations. And that's an interactive web page. Next. Now here is an example of our day one fire weather product, and kind of, well, it just does cover everything. In the red area, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, that's a critical area. Now, the worst weather is expected in northeastern Arizona, at the extremely critical area. Another area, critical area, is over Oklahoma, Texas, and southwest Kansas. And then we have, it's called a scallop line, which is an enclosed area for dry thunderstorms, possibly starting wildfires in New Mexico into Colorado. These outlooks, by the way, are from 12 Greenwich to 12 Greenwich each day. That's kind of our convective day, and we kept the same time period. So we're basically 6 or 7 in the morning till 6 or 7 the next day. Next. Here's an example of the day 3 through 8 product. Now, it's a little hard to see, but the line is actually encompassing fire weather conditions for days 3 and 4 in the Outlook. These are history files, not current data. And we're going to move towards putting these actual out in the future as individual day graphics. But right now, we're combining certain days with one line. And we're moving into, next slide, please. We're moving into experimental probabilities. Basically, this is the same repeat of what you just saw with days 3 and 4 from eastern Arizona through New Mexico. But other areas that are somewhat less likely, we basically say below a 40% chance of wildfire conditions expected, are bounded by the hatched line. And we are not forecasting that there will be wildfires per se. What we're saying is that the weather conditions are favorable, that should a wildfire start, then there would be problems. So next slide, please. Briefly want to touch here that Smokey Bear is right with, get your Smokey on, and 9 out of 10 wildfires are started by humans. That's great, but the problem is the other percentage are started by lightning, and it's on average 61% of your acreage is burned by the lightning-started fires, which are usually in remote places. You see the range is from 35% to some years 88% of the forest and areas are burned by lightning-started fires. Next, please. So basically, if you can, you're not going to stop the lightning, you can stop some human fires, but if you can better predict where the dry thunderstorms and lightning will occur, you get better advanced placement of men and machinery. And in many cases, if you can knock down fires with hand tools in those earliest stages, that becomes the difference sometimes of evacuating entire towns and a non-event. So we're trying to get this advanced word out about dry thunderstorms. Next. I was on a survey assessment team, and over 99% of the wildfires in the Northern Rockies were started by lightning in the year 2000, which at the time was the largest peacetime mobilization in U.S. history. And actually, lightning killed firefighters on the line. So next slide, please. One of the biggest events in Northern California history was a 2-day lightning event in 2008, where over 90% of the acreage was burned in their biggest year from a 2-day lightning event. And that started an area that had not previously been burned in recent time. So lightning is a huge, huge component of what we do, which is hand in hand with our thunderstorm forecast. Next. Again, a busy slide. I just leave it for you to look at later. We have all METAR remote stations, weather information management system, weather data. We have real-time lightning data. We build up climatologies telling us the most fire-prone or lightning-prone areas. We get every form of preset map we can, satellite images. We do use like the weekly drought monitor and other drought monitor graphics. We have a text display for every fire weather product issued in the U.S. We have model data and short-range ensemble forecast for model consensus. And in the past couple of years, I added at the bottom, we have fuel dryness forecast out to 7 days, which next slide. And that is a very hard slide to see on our wall here. There are moist, dry, and very dry areas that are forecast by predictive services out to day 7 at 12-kilometer resolution, and we get those grids for our display. And this is a national map which actually has underneath, well, we can do a national view, or within seconds with our computer workstations, we can zoom into the county level if needed. Next one will show day 6 forecast. This has been a huge step forward for us in our verification and looking at what is expected out there for the fuel component. That's always been a missing component for us, and we've had this for a couple years now. Next. Of course, we use the drought monitor. Next. Again, we have land use, which is a very busy map on the national scale, including barren areas, forested areas, grasslands, and we have the fire weather zones superimposed on this map. And we can, within a matter of seconds, we'll go to the next slide, show you how we can zoom in if we need to for Southern California. And we can overlay model data, surface weather observations on a county scale. So that's, we can go from a national to a county scale in a matter of seconds. Next. We have what's called the biomass burning algorithms, originally produced from Space Science and Engineering in Wisconsin, which show us the hotspots detected over a 24-hour period. Red are likely fires, black means it saturates the signal to the satellite, and those are likely fires, and this was the Southern California wildfires back in '03. Next. It's hard to see the outline of Oklahoma, which is dead center in this map, but it's Oklahoma from December 27th of '05 to January 19th of '06. This is just taking every wildfire or fire, I should say, detected from space and mosaicing them into an image to just show everything that's burned over basically a month period. Next. The MODIS imagery from low Earth orbit polar satellites shows us the wildfires. These are all fires accumulated from space sensors over April of last year for Texas wildfires. And you see the Flint Hills of eastern Kansas into northeast Oklahoma, where the prescribed burns are detected over that time period. And they have a very aggressive prescribed burn program in Kansas that keeps those areas really pristine. Next. Well, Texas we'll hear about today too, and this is courtesy of Greg Carbon. Next slide. Pardon me. One of the things we've learned here over the years is 2010 was an extremely wet year, followed by an extremely dry year. Well, that allows all the fuels to grow robustly, and then when you shut the precip off, you lose all the moisture in the fuels. They cure, they're volatile, and you have plenty of fuel. So from a wet year to a drought year, it just means you can have even worse fires. Next slide. Basically, they showed the area here as a little parallelogram. 6 of the 10 largest wildfires in Texas history were last year. At the time in November, when this was done, it accounted for 50% of the U.S. total, pardon me, or $5 billion in damage. To put it in perspective, the area that burned just in Texas last year is, and next slide please, is like burning down the state of Connecticut there, 20,000 fires. And yeah, we're done. So you can email me. We're at spc.noaa.gov/fire, or happy to take any emails and questions at my email, and I will try to get back to you. I do the development work to a certain extent, but I also do the fire weather shifts as a part-time forecaster. So I've got the best of both worlds. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Philip. And I do note that we've got a couple of questions here, and if we can hold off on those, I've got them, I've noted them, and we'll come back to them at the very end. So thank you. Keep those questions coming in. The next one up is Brad Smith. He's the wildland fire analyst from the Texas Forest Service. Brad, are you ready?
morning, Chad.
All right, thank you very much. Go ahead.
Well, if we can move to the next slide, please. Just jump right into it. In 2011 in Texas, which I heard somebody call the poster child for La Nina here recently, it was an extraordinary year. It was the worst fire year we've had in Texas in our history. And a lot of folks have showed just how bad it was with different metrics, and this is just another metric that you're looking at. It's the statewide Peach Biome Drought Index average since 1900 over the far left of the graph. And the green line that you see are the actual KVDI values by year. The black line kind of cycling through the middle would be the trend. The dry years being above the red line, the wetter years below. And at the far right, you can see that since generally 2000, we've been trending up. And in 2011, the last year, you can see that our average KVDI in the state of Texas was about 550. And just like temperature or rainfall, it was way above the previous peak. So a very dry year, historic year for fire in Texas. And the next slide, please. Some of the impacts, and there's no way you can show in one slide the impacts that last year had on Texas. But if you look at this slide itself, the image, if you could imagine a line generally along I-35 from Sherman down through Dallas to Austin, then maybe back over toward Del Rio, west of that line, generally are grass-dominated or grass-dependent fuels. And most of the fires in that region of the state occur during the winter months and early spring. So February through May is a good time period, and most of the fires did burn in that period. East of that line, where we pick up our timber fuels, brush fuels, is more of a late June fire season, and then a late summer drying, August and September. So I pulled out a few bullets. There on the left, 3,300 fires burned approximately 3 million acres. And last year we destroyed about almost 2,250 homes in the state. Here I do not mention all the impacts. I mean, you can imagine the vehicles that burned, and probably the ultimate loss will be human life. Somewhere, I think about 7 fatalities occurred last year with these fires. But last April was an extremely active part of the season, and just a snapshot, April 6th to the 30th, had 318 fires, which was 10% of the fire total for the year. We burned 1.5 million acres, which was over half of the acres burned last year. And 10% of the homes burned during that period, that April 6th to April 30th. That's the period we had a large fire down in Fort Davis that ran from Martha through Fort Davis up to Wild Rose Pass, about 30 miles in 5 hours. San Angelo, we had a large fire there. Had large fires near Abilene and out near Possum Kingdom Lake, all during this April timeframe. Then later in the summer, August 30th through September 5th, and more specifically September 4th and 5th, very dry conditions. We had an extreme weather event, and we saw another active fire period. 160 fires, 5% of our fires, 166,000 acres, only 6% of the acres, but we lost almost 2,000 homes, 76% of the homes that were lost last year. Most of those occurred in a complex of fires near Austin, Bastrop County. They also burned near Houston, and another group of fires up near Texarkana. So we moved into the more populated area of the state in our heavier fuels, our timber fuels, and that was the result. Next slide, please. So the Texas Forest Service, you know, we've learned over the years, back when I started back in the day, we generally reacted to fire occurrence. We would staff up and move our folks into position once the fires have occurred. But starting back in 2000, more so since 2006, we've tried to become more proactive. We've tried to look at the fuel conditions, the weather trends, the weather conditions, the weather forecast, and try to forecast the fire potential. These are graphics of some of the products that we use. The 30-day and 60-day time frame really works well for fire. Products products like the Drought Monitor that look at 6-month and 12-month periods do have an impact on us when everything lines up 30-day, 60-day, and the Drought Monitor, as it did last year, conditions are at their worst. Most of the time, we're in that 30-day and 60-day window. So we look at the percent of normal rainfall, and also the Texas State Climatologist puts out the Standard Precipitation Index. Another good product. This is a snapshot from last September 4th and 5th. Those areas we talked about, you can see the conditions they were in. Next slide, please. I'm still seeing the old slide. So we look at fire potential, and this is what we try to forecast within the state. Fire potential is a combination of your underlying fuel conditions and also the daily weather. And a couple of products that put that together are Fuel Dryness Map. This is developed from our network of RAWs across the state of Texas. Using the National Fire Danger Rating System model, we can calculate what we call fuel dryness, a combination of ERC, energy release component, and 100-hour fuel moistures, and we rank it. We rank it by percentile. To get the red on the map, you have to be below the 3rd percentile on your 100-hour, and you have to be above the 97th percentile on your ERC. But we found pretty good correlation in fuel conditions in this map. The fire danger map, it's a daily map, generally represents the strength of the weather. It's built mostly on wind speed, 1-hour fuel moistures, and it's a daily snapshot. It resets each day. It doesn't carry forth as does the fuel dryness, which has about a 7-day memory. So when you look at these two maps, and we're looking at April 15th of last year, the day when we had large fire occurrence, and you see the overlap of the extremely critical areas, extreme fire danger, and extremely dry fuels. Those are the areas where we expect to have large, dangerous fires. Next slide. Looking forward to this year, these are our current maps, 30-day percent of normal rainfall and our 60-day standard precipitation index. And you can see that most of the state is doing very well since that weather trend from December and January with frequent moisture. So the fire problem right now is pretty much non-existent in Texas. We are concerned through March and April with the La Nina forecast. If this trend breaks and we go back to a dry trend, windy trend, we do expect some problems. The driest area right now, and the biggest threat would be in the Lubbock to Childress area up toward Amarillo, where you see the dry on a 30-day map. It doesn't quite show up on a 60-day yet, but it does represent emerging dryness on a 30-day map, and probably before too long, without additional rainfall, it'll be showing up on the SPI map also. So that would be an area of concern. As an agency, we have limited resources, so it's important to identify the areas of concern and staff resources in those areas, move them around the state. The next map, or next slide, shows our daily or current fire potential looking at the fuel dryness map and today's forecast fire danger map. And you can see that both products are in our adjective ratings, generally moderate or below normal moisture. We're in pretty good shape. And with a map like that, we would not expect any type of fire activity today. So these are the tools we use, and we use them on a daily basis. There are a couple wild cards this year. And on the next slide, the picture on the left was taken back in September down near Junction, Texas, just west of San Antonio, and shows some of the Juniper mortality that we've suffered through the drought of 2011. The Juniper mortality is probably most intense from that location, San Antonio, west to maybe Fort Stockton, but it's also in the San Angelo area, all the way up to Lubbock, off to Caprock. So we have these dry crowns, available fuel that we're concerned about. And when fire transitions from the surface into the crowns, that's when it becomes most difficult to control. But the other wild card, it may have the biggest impact this year, is the below normal fire fuel loading. If there's any silver lining to a drought, it's that we don't grow grass. And the picture on the right represents that. when fire tries to move across this below normal loading, it takes a lot of weather. It takes specifically a lot of wind to push it across. We, back on the 22nd, had a big wind event, 35 sustained, gusts to 55, RH in the 15% range, and we picked up very few fires. In fact, local resources, local fire departments were able to contain all the fires that occurred. And I attribute this, I think, in large part to the fine fuel loading. It's not really something you can measure. It's more anecdotal, what we've seen across the state. But with each wind event, we test it, and we feel a little more confident that that's what's going on. And Chad, I think that's the end of my slides.
All right, Brad, thank you very much. Next up, we've got John Weir, who's a research associate in the Natural Resource Ecology and Management at Oklahoma State, and he's also the chairman of the Oklahoma Prescribed Fire Council. John's going to talk about using fire as a rangeland management tool. John, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, thank you, John. Go ahead.
Thank you. Again, I'm John Weir with Oklahoma State University. I have responsibility. I do teaching. I teach prescribed fire courses. I also do extension work, working with landowners and agency groups and training, and then how to properly and safely apply prescribed fire to the land, and then do work with fire ecology work. And I'm going to kind of address some questions and stuff. Everybody's been talking about wildfire, but we're going to talk about prescribed fire, because again, fire is a natural and historical occurring event throughout all the United States, throughout most of the world, and most of our native vegetation types, and especially here in the Southern Plains. Fire is very important. Also, fire occurred historically, but the biggest majority of it was man-caused, human-caused. Native Americans used fire for numerous reasons and reap the benefits of fire from it for that. And the other thing we need to remember is that fire is going to happen no matter what we try to do, how we try to suppress it or whatever. And again, that's been seen in last dramatic fires that we've had over the past several decades. The larger fire events, again, are getting because of huge fuel buildups and the lack of the use of fire. Also, to kind of bring prescribed fire, or people actively applying fire to their land, into perspective, in Texas, or in Oklahoma, Kansas, and Florida, there's over 1.5 million acres in each one of those states burned intentionally every year. Just to put that in perspective on the number of acres that are burned intentionally by prescribed fire. But also, again, with the drought occurring, there's a lot of questions that people have about fire and using fire and the drought that we have. So next slide, please. One of the first questions people have is, should I burn? Probably one of the biggest things that they need to think about is what's their goals and objectives. That's one of the biggest things about applying fire, even in a non-drought time of year, is why do you want to do it? What are you trying to achieve? Again, if you're a livestock producer and you're wanting to have pasture for livestock to graze, and you burn it off and nothing regrows, you're not quite reaching goals and objectives with that. And also, you need to think about, what are you burning? Are you going to be burning your entire property or just portions of it? That makes a big difference. So think about scaling back a little bit of your fire, the size of it, and what you're doing. Also, you may consider, some type of patch burning, where again you burn only portions of an area that you're going to burn and rotate that fire around with that. And as a place there, we have an OSU extension publication with that about patch burning and about, how we can use fire even effectively in smaller areas and doing things to still achieve goals and objectives that we need. Next slide. Thank you. Probably the biggest question you hear is, what if I don't have enough fuel to burn? And again, as just was alluded to, which maybe is one of the saviors of the, some of the wildfire stuff, is we don't produce a lot of grass, a lot of fine fuels during drought. And so if that's the case, if you don't have the fuel, don't burn, because again, first off, you're going to probably be disappointed in what that fire does, because again, the fuel load isn't there. Again, if you're trying to control cedar or juniper, you don't have enough fuel to control it. You're not going to be happy with what you have. Next question you may really look for is, why do you not have enough fuel? That's a big thing. More than likely, you need to adjust your stocking rates and stuff with livestock, because you're grazing all your fuels down. And again, as you can see in the graph there on the lower right, it's been shown time and time again that light to moderate stocking rates, again, make more return, make more money in heavily stocking areas. And again, so we should always be managing for a drought with our livestock producers. They should be always managing for that. Because especially here in the southern Great Plains, we're always not too far away from one with that. And again, we've got publications about determining stocking rates on native rangeland. Next slide. Probably one of the biggest concerns a lot of people have is about, will fire kill my native plants during a drought? And with one thing we have to remember is our native plants are adapted to fire and they're adapted to drought. They've been here for centuries, have been through been through more severe droughts than we can even imagine, been through more severe fire events than we can probably even imagine. And those plant communities are still here. And so that's the most important thing. The thing that we need to remember about looking at the impacts of any fire, whether it's prescribed or wildfire, and going out saying, well, it just killed everything, is time since fire and also rainfall. Without rainfall, nothing's going to grow anyway. But also that time since fire allows stuff to recover. Many times I've seen areas that's burned through stands of oak forest that it definitely did top kill the oaks, but again, they're resprouting, they're going to come back. But a lot of times you don't see the resprouts for a couple of years. They're just slow to come back. Just again, depends on the rainfall and the season of the year. So again, we need to look at fire effects and manage that and look at that. And again, we have publications on that that are listed there. Next. Good question about, should we wait to see if it rains before we start burning? And, knowing if it's going to rain, that's a benefit anytime, whether you're in a drought or not. And it'd be nice if we knew that, but as we know, we don't. One thing you could possibly do is again wait to see if we do get spring rains. If stuff starts getting some adequate moisture in the spring, and change our burn season of burn to later in the year, to later on in the summer, May, June, July. Again, as long as you have adequate fine fuel, you can get a fire to burn about any time of year that you would like it to burn. And so again, looking at that is very important, and thinking about different seasons of the year that we can burn and changing that up. Next. And probably another good question is, again, what about the risk of the fire escaping? Is there more risk during a drought? The thing to think about, again, there is a lot of good days to burn during periods of drought. We still have decent weather days that we're looking for when we burn, but also there are some extreme days, and probably one of the biggest dangers that occurs is a lot of the larger fuels that we burn begin to dry out and become drier, and they will catch on fire and burn, creating more risk with that. Also, again, as with evergreens such as cedar, the leaf moisture dries down and they become more volatile and stand a greater chance of catching on fire, and again, increasing the risk of spot fire or escape. So those are some things that you have to think about and kind of weigh the conditions of what the conditions are, what the fuels are, what's going on. Next. One thing that we're fortunate, here in Oklahoma to have is through the Mesonet, and through that is through OK Fire program, again, which we can use to monitor weather, to do fire danger stuff. Probably one of the best things that it has is a fire prescription planner, so we can plug in our prescriptions and our parameters that we want to burn under, and check the weather and see how those things collapse. And this is probably one of the best tools that we have, and it is the best weather forecasting item that we have with fire that I've seen anywhere in the U.S. Next. And just for any of those publications, anybody interested, you can go to our website. That's nrem.okstate.edu/extension, and you can, over on the left, you can click on extension publications, and it'll pull up a whole list of publications about fire and rangeland management. I'd be glad for you to look at that. And with that, I think that's all I have.
All right, thank you, John. And just a reminder, please use the chat box to put your questions in, and we'll address those at the end of the webinar today. The next presenter we have up is Karen Stafford, who's Wildland Urban Interface Specialist with the Texas Forest Service, and she's going to kind of round out the discussion today with the Ready, Set, Go description of the Ready, Set, Go program for reducing risk of wildfire to property. And just to remind everybody, after Karen goes, we're going to turn it over to the state climatologist for some short remarks, and then we'll answer those questions. So Karen, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to present to you today. We've heard some really scary stuff this morning in relation to the drought and the wildfire outlook for the rest of the year, but part of my job is to let the homeowners and the community leaders know that they're not powerless. There are, in fact, many things they can do to protect themselves and their communities. And right now, I want to give you just a very brief introduction of the two main programs that we use in Texas for educating homeowners on the proactive measures that they can do to prepare themselves and their homes long before the wildfire threatens their community, as well as some things that they can do when they're faced with a wildfire and an evacuation. First of all is the Ready, Set, Go program. This program has 3 basic steps. The Ready involves the Firewise practices that should be done well before a wildfire strikes, and we're going to look in more detail at this step in a minute. Then the Set is aimed at the precautions the homeowners should take when a wildfire is approaching their community, and just when there are many fires in the area, or just during times of heightened fire danger. And finally, the Go represents the evacuation. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a small introduction to the Firewise Communities program. This is a national program that gives national recognition to homeowners and communities who've taken these proactive measures to prepare and prevent wildfires. The best part about this program is that it's a grassroots program that must be community driven. This means that the community gets to decide what they feel their highest priorities are in regards to the fire risk. They get to decide how they want to address those risks. And then, of course, this is done with the assistance of a wildland-urban interface specialist. But the big important thing is that we're not the ones making the decisions for them. The community is making their own decisions, and we as the professionals, we're just there to give them guidance and recommendations. Next slide, please. And here you can see the basic steps and the requirements of becoming a recognized Firewise Community USA. First, the community is to contact a Firewise representative. And then with that fire representative, they will conduct a hazard risk assessment of their community and the homes within that community. From there becomes the formation of their Firewise board, and this is just the group of homeowners in the community who are going to oversee the project, oversee writing the Firewise protection plan, and then submitting the annual report back into Firewise every year for renewal. The community must complete at least one major project annually. This can be anything from developing a second evacuation route to be used during emergencies, reducing hazardous fuel in the community. I've seen some communities take this on as a major 911 addressing problem in their community. And then from there, they have to observe one Firewise Day annually, and this is just a major education day for the community. It can be a standalone event, or it can piggyback off of something the community already does annually. It might be a fundraiser or something. And then it invests $2 per capita in Firewise projects. And this is the one that people usually shy away from, but this is not meaning that somebody has to write a actual check to Firewise. This $2 per capita investment is just tracking the volunteer hours, the value of those hours, and any kind of equipment that may be donated to the community for doing their project. And then finally, they submit a report to Firewise, first of all with recognition, and then they have to do this annually to maintain their status. Next slide, please. Now I want to give you just a few examples of some of the main Firewise activities that homeowners can do. The home construction and maintenance are the key factors to structure hardening, just as it would be with a hurricane or any other disaster. We educate homeowners on the importance of using non-combustible construction materials, but this is not enough. We also encourage homeowners to maintain a minimum of 30 feet of clearance around their home, and this is what we refer to as defensible space. Next slide, please. So defensible space is extremely important because it not only breaks up the continuity of the fuels that lead to the home, which will either fire or at least decrease the fire's intensity around the home, but it also allows firefighters to safely gain access around the home, defend it without becoming trapped. And this also protects the home itself and prevents ignition from direct flame contact. So here are some recommendations for creating defensible space. Removing any continuous fuels by thinning the vegetation, removing any dead vegetation, especially in the fall as some landscaping beds die off. Remove or prune the vegetation next to the windows, and then choose plants that have low flammability and a high moisture content, and we prefer native plants. Next slide, please. And then with all this said, I think the most important point to make is that defensible space, it can be attractive. It does not have to be totally devoid of vegetation. It focuses more on the landscape design, the plant species selections, and the proper maintenance for the trees and shrubs around the home. So now I want to take a look at some of the details involved with the home construction itself. Using non-combustible roof materials such as clay tile, metal, or asphalt composite shingle is definitely the preferred method. However, this again is not enough. All the eaves around the house need to be boxed in with some sort of a non-combustible material. And then also the vents, both the attic vents, roof vents, soffit vents, they all should be enclosed with some kind of a metal, a small gauge, fine metal screening. If you just think about the way a roof is built and the way that attic vents are placed, they're placed there to draw air in and ventilate the attic. Now, if you have a wildfire in the area and you have embers blowing through, they're going to do the same thing with those fire embers. As those vents suck the air in, they're bringing in embers. Those embers can sit there and smolder in the attic of a home for several minutes or several hours, long after the main fire front has passed, and then it'll eventually compromise that home. Slide, please. For the walls and windows, again, we encourage the non-combustible materials for the walls, such as brick, stone, hardy plank, stucco, just for some examples. And then for windows, we encourage having smaller windows and double pane thermal pane windows. This reduces the heat transfer through the glass, preventing ignitions for the curtains, blinds, any kind of furniture that may be close to that window itself. And then once again, keeping the vegetation in mind surrounding those windows, keeping it to a minimum and well spaced so there's adequate clearance between the vegetation and the window itself. And next slide. And the same thing with your foundation vents, just making sure they're completely enclosed with some kind of a fine wire screening. Next slide. Wooden attachments, they're often the most common link, weakest link for the home. Decks are a great surface for fire embers to gather until they finally ignite the deck, which will then carry the fire to the home. Also, the underside of decks can be especially important considering what might be under them. Some decks may only have accumulated leaves, sticks, or other yard debris. Meanwhile, I've seen several homes where the homeowners use these space to store gasoline, paint cans, and any other kind of dangerous and highly flammable combustible materials. In these situations, we recommend as a homeowner clean out the underside of their deck and then go back and enclose them with either a metal screen or some other kind of non-combustible materials. The picture that you see here, actually the pictures that you don't see is the home that was to the right of here. It was completely destroyed by the fire. And what we could see through the evidence was that the fire followed a wooden fence all the way around till it connected to the structure. That wooden fence acted as a fuse and until it compromised the home. This home right next to it, the fire continued to follow the wooden fence, but what we found was somebody, the homeowners or the firefighters in the area, had ripped the gate off of its hinges. Well, what this did was it acted as just enough of a fire break to stop that fire's progression leading up to that home, and this home was saved due to those actions. And also, this was the only house left standing on the street during this particular fire. Next slide, please. And then we look for any other weak links that could carry the fire to the home. Here you see two window units. The one on the right, the fire, it crept around this otherwise Firewise home until it finally found that wooden brace of that air conditioner unit, which acted as that fuse and that weakest link to that home. Luckily, the firefighters were moving through the area and they saw this, so they were able to save the home. However, the home on the left, it was the exact same scenario, a wooden brace under the air conditioner unit, but there was nobody there to detect it and put it out. So once that window unit falls out of the window, it allows an open passage for fire embers and the flames to enter that home. And not just air conditioning units, but any other kind of weak link that a home may have. I've seen plastic dryer vents melt off, causing an opening for the fire to enter the home. Any kind of lawn furniture with cushions on it are easily to ignite. Grass doormats easily ignite with fire embers. And that's not to say that homes can't have those things, but maybe as a homeowner is evacuating, that just needs to be the last mitigation that they do is just throw their doormats away from their home. Slide, please. So that covers the ready. And so now let's talk a little bit about the set. Again, this is what you're going to do when the fires are in your area, and if you feel like your home is going to be threatened at some point. We recommend to homeowners to dress in appropriate clothing. That would be wear all cotton clothing, some good sturdy leather boots, have a bandana just to wrap around your face so you're not breathing in the smoke as much, and try to wear some good leather gloves as well. Remove any of the flammable window shades or any curtains inside your home. Shut off your air conditioning unit. Turn your lights on so the firefighters can find your home in the smoke. Back your car into your driveway, which just improves your exit when you try to evacuate. And then just continuously monitor the conditions and be aware of what's going on around you. The one thing I forgot to add to this slide is the evacuation kit. Just having a good stock of food, water, your medications, some extra eyeglasses, and insurance documentation, any other kind of paperwork, and any kind of family heirlooms or photographs, and just basically anything that cannot be replaced. And this would be something good to just go ahead and pack in your car, just so you know it's taken care of. Slide, please. And then finally, the go. This just represents the evacuation. If there is an evacuation, understand that it's for the homeowner's safety as well as the safety of the firefighters, because oftentimes the firefighters are trying to enter an area at the same time the homeowners are trying to get out of that area. So if there is going to be an evacuation, we just ask the homeowners leave early, don't wait to be asked. And then don't forget to take your emergency supply kit and your pets with you. Slide. And then finally, in conclusion, wildfire awareness and preparedness, it can be as easy as the Firewise and Ready, Set, Go program. The important thing is that homeowners just need to understand that they also have a responsibility during these times of drought and elevated wildfire threat. I've also included the 2 websites for the Ready, Set, Go program and for Firewise Communities USA. And if anybody needs any further information, please feel free to contact myself or look at these 2 websites. Thank you, and I just hope that everybody can stay safe out there.
Okay, thank you, Karen. And I just want to thank the presenters for sharing their perspectives on the challenges of managing fire. I know this is just a snapshot of a fairly complex process, so thank you again for taking the time to be on here and to present your information to us. So if at the very end again, again, the presentation will be available on the drought.gov website. You can find the contact information for all the presenters, and we encourage people to interact with presenters for more information. If you have any follow-up questions that you didn't bring up today, please go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and start our kind of the last portion of the webinar, which is just hearing from the state climatologist. We have several that have joined us. I have at least 6 here on my list. We have Nancy Sellover from Arizona. We have Pat Gannon from Missouri. We have John Nielsen Gammon from Texas. Renee McPherson from Oklahoma. Dave Dubois from New Mexico, and Barry Kine from Louisiana. And I know Dave and Barry would like to say have a couple of prepared remarks before we get into sort of the open portion. But Dave or Barry, would you like to start? Dave, why don't you go first, and then Barry, you can go after Dave.
They have my slide up actually. Should I?
I'm sorry, I didn't know. Go ahead, Barry.
Go ahead. All right, so I'll just jump right in here. I only have 1 slide, so this will be very brief. But I did want to give a quick update on the Louisiana drought conditions, which have improved dramatically over the last couple of weeks. It's been really dramatic. And in fact, over the last 2 weeks, if you look at the table at the bottom, Louisiana went from roughly 73% of the state having, anywhere from D1 to D4 drought, having drought somewhere, 73% down to 44%, just a 2-week period. And of course, what drove this were some heavy rains across the state, primarily concentrated in the central part of the state. In fact, we had 3 specific locations that had over 14 inches of rain just in the last 2 weeks. And an entire climate division 5, which is our central climate division, averaged out at 8.8 inches for the last 2 weeks, whereby 3 inches would be considered normal for this time period. So it's really taken a huge bite out of the drought here. And what's really driving this is we had several instances of cyclogenesis in the Western Gulf. And Brian Fuchs alluded to this earlier, that the last few weeks have been very un-La Nina-like, and that certainly has played out here. And then those storms have tracked across the central part of the state. The whole state have actually gotten rain, but the central part of the state is where most of this rain has been concentrated. But if you notice in the recent Drought Monitor depiction, the southeastern part of the state is still in D3, and the rains really keep missing this particular area. While they've gotten some very light rain, it's still running below normal. And Climate Division 9, which really roughly coincides with that D3 area, over the last 2.5 weeks have had 2.1 inches, and that's still about an inch below normal. And we might even be under characterizing drought in that particular area as we look back over the past 3-6 months and so on. So we still have some issues in Louisiana, but the last 2 weeks have been really good for the vast majority of the state. In fact, this is probably as well off as we've been drought-wise for at least a year. So things are looking up, although we do still have some problems. So I'll go ahead and stop there.
Okay, thanks, Barry. David, do you have some things you'd like to say?
Yeah, I'll be brief, but I just want to just kind of give an update. I wasn't here last month, the last call, but at the end of the year, New Mexico was about 73% of normal, and we had some, the main focus is over in the southeast part of the state where we had some shortages of annual precip in the order of 10 inches, specifically like Clovis, and just want to give an update on what has happened since the end of the year. And we've got in terms of water year, a lot of our state is around normal or slightly below normal, but there hasn't been a lot of precip in that part where the drought has been the hardest. Specifically in February, most of the precip has been in northern New Mexico, which is good. That's good for our snowpack. But in southern New Mexico, it's been dry. We haven't had our last rain here in Las Cruces was on the 28th of January. So our snowpack, it hasn't been. It started off looking well in December, but it slacked off. So we've got. So I'm just pulling up the SNOTEL and the stream flow forecasts that came out a week ago, and they're not very. They don't look very good. And I mean, we need to look a little more into that, but the kind of words they're showing is mediocre snowpack. So they're giving some predictions of if you're shaping up to be below average, which will lead to reduced allocation for some water users, unless we see a significant shift in storm track over the next few months. But we need to keep in mind that a lot of our heavier snowpack is built around this month in March, so February, March. So there's still time for things to build up, but just giving those warnings for now. And like the Rio Grande Basin is about 85% of average. It's up from compared to last year, it was 68%. So but we'll be keeping track of this, and hope to give an update next time. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Would anybody else like to make any comments from the state climatologist community before we move on?
Excuse me, this is John Nielsen again from Texas. You heard Brian give an overview. Just want to comment on two particular aspects. First off, during this time of year, the main drought impacts tend to be either fire danger or winter wheat. Fire danger has been discussed. The winter wheat crop seems to be doing fairly well. The central Texas portion is better than the Panhandle, but even the Panhandle winter wheat is in places looking okay, although it's vulnerable to any brief stretches of dryness because the deep soil moisture is pretty poor. Other thing to update on is the reservoir situation. We've seen significant improvement in water levels across half of the state. So basically, the northeastern half of the state is doing much better, but the southwestern half reservoirs have not responded. There hasn't been enough rain to produce significant runoff. So parts of the state are doing much better, and parts have yet to improve.
All right, thanks, John. Anybody else?
This is Rachel Riley in Oklahoma. Renee McPherson had to head to another meeting, but she just wanted to mention that there will be an OK Fire workshop in Norman, Oklahoma on March 16th, and I typed where you can register in the dialogue box. So she just wanted to let you guys know about that.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Okay, last call. All right. Well, we'll now open it up to questions and comments. For those able, we invite you to stay on the line to continue this conversation. Rachel, if you'd go ahead and put the list of resources on the screen, just so people can see where the presentation materials are going to be posted. Again, they're going to be on the Drought portal at drought.gov in the Southern Plains section. There will be a 2-page summary that will be published probably next week. And again, the webinar recording of the webinar will be posted on the Skip YouTube page. I'm just going to, there was a couple questions that came out. Phillip, Bothwell, are you still on the line?
I'm here.
Okay, you could probably see them on your chat dialog box there, but the first one was just about the shapefile. It was a fuel dryness shapefile, and there was a question of just where you were able to get that from.
Right, that is a joint venture from Predictive Services that makes all those areas available, and Western Region headquarters, and Chris Gibson in Missoula is the one that actually takes those shapefile pieces of data and converts it to a 12-kilometer grid, and we just simply FTP the data into ourselves and display it on our NAWIPS computer system.
It looks like we may have a follow-up question to that. Well, let me go on to the next question, which involves you too, Phil. The next question was for, how, and I'm not sure which projections they're referring to, but how are people using the projections and the data, and who is using the projections? And I'm guessing the outlooks in this case, your fire weather outlooks. Are they incident responders, meteorologists, et cetera?
Well, they're designed virtually anybody in the fire community, whether it be federal, state, local, and down to the fire community. We've made these, are all available to the incident meteorologists too. And I think related to this question is one thing what we're trying to do in our coordination and our looking at the weather conditions is we're trying to produce a speaking with one voice so that there's a unified forecast out there. Not that there's, there's always differences of certain things and small scale differences we can't cover, but we do use this coordination tool to basically pull everything together from Predictive Services, the GACs, even the people down like LA County Fire and Cal Fire and stuff. They're on the GAC conference calls. So we take that information, we take our weather data, and simply produce the images, graphics available for anybody to use in their fire planning.
Okay, thanks, Phillip. Are there any other questions that people would like to raise before we close the webinar here? Okay, well, I hope, folks, if you do have any follow-up questions, please contact the presenters. A couple of them, John Weir had to leave already. He posted his contact information as well as Karen did. Karen did too. As always, thank you for your time today. Look forward to seeing you on the next webinar, which will be on March 8th. So have a good rest of the week. Thank you very much.